Well, today is the start of another big long drive. This time we're going on holiday for a week. Today we're travelling 167 miles in my Tesla Model 3 to the northwest corner of Scotland known as Sutherland. We're going to a small hamlet called Ryconic, which sits at the end of Loch Inchard, and it's at a junction between the A838 going to Durness and the B801 going to Kinlochbervie. Now this distance in my Tesla Model 3 is no sweat whatsoever. It can travel easily 290 miles between recharges. Nonetheless, I charged up my car 100% to take advantage of the freely available solar power at my own house, and that will minimise the cost of driving there. So as usual for travelling to the Northwest Highlands, we're travelling westbound first on the A96 to Inverness, but this time we're stopping at a popular place just outside Forres called Brodie's, and we're going to take the advantage of purchasing their butterfly cupcakes, which are absolutely delicious. Okay, right, here we go. So we continue our journey westbound to Inverness, and there we top up on our grocery supplies before continuing north. Now all 4 supermarkets in Inverness have all got pod point chargers, which are free on AC charge and cost 28 pence per kilowatt hour on DC charge. I wanted to get a quick top up even though my battery was at 76%, but as you can see we had a problem with charging up. So here we've got the Tesco car park in Inverness. I think this is the Inches retail park. We've got 4 pod points. This is the rapid charger, which I didn't use. I was intending to use this pod point here. This is 22 kilowatts. There was a car park there, so I couldn't get my Type 2 cable to reach from there to my Model 3 over there. Traffic on the A96 was very busy to Inverness, but now we travel north on the A9 and we cross 3 firths. The first of which is the Bewley Firth, which we cross with the Keswick Bridge. Then we continue north on the A9 to the Cromarty Firth and we cross using the Cromarty Bridge. At Evanton we turn off onto the B9176, also known as the Struy Road. This cuts across a big corner to the Dornoch Firth, where it rejoins at the A836. This is a much quieter road and we leave the busy traffic behind on the A9 and we start to enjoy the road a lot more without having to be stuck behind slow traffic. At the Dornoch Firth we join the A836 and travel west to Bonar Bridge and then northwest from there on the A836 to Lerg, which is a very pretty village on the banks of a loch. Beyond Lerg, the double track roads give way to single track roads where we turn left onto the A838 heading towards Laxford Bridge. In symbolic terms, this is where the Sutherland adventure begins. The traffic on this Saturday was surprisingly quiet and we had a good run up this single track road, able to maintain speeds in excess of 40 miles an hour most of the way. The rolling country around the southern portion of Loch Shin gives way to mountains further north along the banks. The first mountain that we come across on the north side of the road is called Ben He. This is a prominent Corbett which can be seen from many miles away towards the east. But next, the most prominent mountain that we come across is a pyramidal mountain called Ben Stack. It's not at all big. It's only about 720 meters tall, but what it lacks in height, it more than makes up for in terms of dramatic appearance. Next up on the north side of the road we've got Arkle, and then you can also find Foynaven. And then finally we get to Laxford Bridge, which is literally nothing more than a bridge and a road junction. Then we turn right and then we have good quality roads for the remaining journey up to our cottage. So we're nearly at the cottage now and it's just around this corner here. So we stopped at Kinlochbervie to begin with, just to go for a short but brief walk around there, and now here we are. Well, this is unique. We have got outdoor sockets, IP66 rated socket outlets, just the regular 3-pin socket, and that is fantastic. It means I don't have to have a window left open during the midgie season. Let's go see how far I have to take this. From here, up here, and across to there. On the next day, we took the road north to Durness. This is the A838 and it's predominantly single track most of the way. We had good driving speeds most of the way and the traffic was light on this Sunday morning. However, what we found was that later in the day and on subsequent days, this road does get busy with a lot of tourist traffic. So you can find yourself pulling into passing places quite a lot more often. The wind was coming in from the north and there were some very heavy showers early on that day, but we had a dry spell and we had very fresh, cold northerly winds that day. The first destination that we had was the Smoo cave. What you'll find is that there is free parking right next to the cave, but the parking there is very small and it's quickly filled up. So what we did was that we used a very new pay and display car park, which is a bit further away. So we're making our way down the footpath to the Smoo caves. The Smoo cave is the largest sea cave in the United Kingdom and it is justifiably very, very popular indeed despite the remote location. There is a lot of facilities involved with getting down to the Smoo cave and getting into it. As you can see, the footpaths are all very well maintained and engineered, and once you get into the Smoo cave itself, you've got a very, very large chamber indeed. Now there are 3 chambers to the Smoo cave. The first 2 chambers from the entrance are accessible by foot, but the third chamber is accessible by boat only. Now what you'll find is that you have the option of taking a boat tour into that third chamber. It costs £10 per adult, but we didn't take the opportunity to use the boat tour. Instead, what we did was that we took the footpath up the other side of the valley to the headlands, and here you can have a long distance shot looking up the valley into the cave itself, and you can appreciate the power of the sea from this location. With the fresh northerly wind, it was a moderate sea state, but I know in a small boat it can feel quite rough, as I experienced last week on the Isle of Egg. Once we returned to the road, we then crossed the road and then found a track on the other side of the road where we were able to escape all of the crowds. This is a short loop following easy to follow track up and over open moorland. You have nice extensive views in all directions. Once we had finished that, it was time to return to the road and then get our cheese toasties before continuing on for our second walk in Durness. So we are at Balnaceil Bay, and I've been to this bay before. It's got some lovely white sandy beaches here, but what we're going to do, instead of going out to the peninsula north, we're actually going to head west, and we're going to attempt to walk around the Kyle of Durness. After following a footpath through the golf course, the terrain at the other side becomes much rougher in terms of vegetation, but the footpath is still easy to follow. The coastline itself becomes quite rocky, with small cliffs and also some rocky beaches. We found there was an island which was linked tidally to the mainland, and we were able to walk across to it, and we had a good vantage point from which we could see the whole of the Kyle of Durness. It really is a spectacular sight, and it reminds me somewhat of Luskintyre Beach on South Harris Island. As you can see, it's low tide and there are extensive sandbanks. However, tide was coming in and we really didn't want to get down onto the sandbanks to explore a bit more. Okay, so we've got a day of heavy showers merging into longer spells of rain. So we are going to be doing something indoors for today, and that means we're driving back over to the east coast, and in particular we're going to Golspie. And in Golspie we have got a castle called Dunrobin Castle, which looks absolutely fantastic. It's about 70 miles each way, so it's reckoned to be an hour and a half drive from our cottage. But I quite like this road to Lairg, and I think it's going to be a good fun drive. The road from Lairg to Golspie was a new one for me, but it was very quiet and it was a good fun drive. But Golspie itself was familiar territory. I was there about 8 years ago, and what I would do was climb Ben Braggy, which is right behind Golspie, and then enjoy what I consider to be the very best fish and chips in Scotland. Draw the fish and chips. Now, being an Aberdeenshire resident, we've got plenty of castles in my own county. Fyvie, Castle Fraser and Craigievar castles are just a few of the examples, but I'm going to have to say this one beats all of them. It is absolutely magnificent. However, when you arrive at the car park at the castle, you don't get the best view of the castle. After all, why would the best view of the castle be from a car park with loads of cars in front of it? Once you're inside the castle, it costs £13.50 for access to all areas of the castle. That includes the gardens as well as all the interior hallways and rooms. The original castle was built in the year 1235. Since then, in the 1700s and the 1800s, it has been extended considerably. Now, the architect of the 1800s extension was Sir Charles Barry, who is also the same architect who designed the Houses of Parliament as you see it today. So this building has been occupied by the Earls and Dukes of Sutherland since the 13th century. And the 5th Duke of Sutherland was the last Duke to occupy it in 1963. In the 1960s, following the Duke's death, the castle was inherited by the Countess of Sutherland, and it became a boys' boarding school for a period of 7 years. Since then, it's become a family home once more, which is open to the public. Now, I've been absolutely mesmerised by the standard of the rooms and the standard of the furniture and paintings that you have here. If I go to other castles, all the furniture looks old and it needs to be preserved, and it can't really be used, otherwise it will just simply fall apart. But here, whilst the furniture looks old-fashioned and, in my opinion, very tasteful, it looks brand new and it looks perfectly serviceable. You could easily have a function here and just open up all the rooms to their original purpose. The castle sits high on a rocky outcrop overlooking the gardens below, and those gardens in turn sit right on the coast of the Moray Firth. It is a magnificent view looking out, but once we go out of the castle and look back from the gardens towards it, you get to see how special this castle really is. Annexed to the gardens is a separate building which the Sutherlands will call the Museum. This will display trophy heads of animals which have been shot by the family members on safari in places such as Africa and also the Highlands of Scotland. We've also got various archaeological artifacts in the building as well, and it's fascinating to have a browse through that place. Now, there's also a falconry display which happens twice a day at 11:30 and 2:30. It's worth definitely hanging around for either of those two things. We had a Harris hawk and a peregrine falcon on display, however they were far too quick for my camera. You know, I've been to Golspie a few times in the past, mainly for fish and chips whilst I was on commissioning in a nearby shipyard. But I've never seen this place, and it really is magnificent, and I definitely will want to visit again. So after the trip to Dunrobin Castle, we stop at Golspie, and we have got electric chargers. So we have got 4 rapid chargers, 50 kilowatts, those are 30 pence per kilowatt hour. And we have got a fast charger, 22 kilowatts at 20 pence per kilowatt hour. So that's cheaper than charging up at my house. So of course, the rule is if it's cheaper somewhere else, charge up there. So in Golspie, we visited a gift shop, and then we had the obligatory ice cream in the ice cream parlour. So on day 4 of our trip, we wanted to climb the Munro of Ben Hope. Now beyond Durness, the A838 goes all the way around Loch Erible. It's quite a twisty road at this point, and you can't drive quite as quickly, but you can still maintain 30 to 40 miles an hour along the shorter lines of sight. But once you turn off the A838 onto the Ben Hope road, this is an unclassified road, and it really is something else. It's twisty, it's very narrow, passing places are infrequent, and at times the road is rutted. Despite these difficulties, my Model 3 never grounded on this road, and that gave me confidence that this car was indeed fit for purpose on all British roads. So here's my car. We're parked at the Ben Hope car park, and this footpath is this road is it's been quite a slow road to drive on. It's quite narrow, quite bumpy at times. Lots of green grass going down the middle of it. So if you're in a tricycle configuration, you're going to have a hard time. And not many passing places either, so but it is a quiet road relatively speaking. So here we are on the footpath heading up to Ben Hope. Up to Ben Hope, the footpath is well used. We've got a few heave-hoes quite low down on the footpaths where there are a few rocky outcrops that we need to pull ourselves over. But the biggest feature of the footpath low down is the bogginess. It is very muddy in places. Higher up there are lots of slippery sections, but you can avoid most of those with relative ease. Once we get onto the southern ridge properly, the footpath starts to firm up and it becomes easier underfoot to just simply stick to the footpath. There is a false top before the main summit, but it does offer excellent views in all directions once you get to this false top. But as you can see, once we get to the main top, we can start to see showers starting to loom. So looking east, we've got Ben Loyal, the most northerly Corbett. To the southeast, we've got Ben Clebrec. Further south, in the rain showers, we've got Ben He. And then further southwest, we've got Ben Stack. Looking west, we've got Cranstachy. And then finally, we've got Loch Erible. It was then time to make our way down, but the lower we got, the rougher and boggier the footpath became, and it became worse pretty close to the road. Finally, we had the journey back home. The weather was improving and the temperature was starting to warm up to about 15 degrees, which in Scotland is very comfortable in the bright summer sunshine. We had the Ben Hope Road to go on again, and then all the way around Loch Erible. We got some unique views going the other way, but once we got past Durness, the view opening out onto the Kyle of Durness was really very spectacular indeed. We got back to the cottage and it was bathed in glorious sunlight. Day number 5 and the weather had turned glorious, and indeed the weather forecast for the rest of the week was going to be uninterrupted blue skies. So we wanted to go to an island called Handa, and it's about 16 miles away from our cottage. So the drive here took the main road to Scory, and then we turned off onto a side road which goes down to a tiny little village called Tarbet, where we have the ferry to Handa Island.
Well, the next ferry was full up and the ferry after that's full up. So we're now going to be on ferry number 5. So in the meantime, you can come and climb the hill just next to the ferry port. There we've got Handa Island. Now there are beaches which are just around the corner there, and that's where the boat will eventually land.
The ferry costs £20 per adult, with departures roughly every 20 minutes between 9 o'clock, and the last ferry going out to Handa Island is at 2 o'clock. The last ferry coming back from Handa Island is about 4 to 45. Now typically you should allow at least 3 hours on the island itself, but in our instance we had a bit more time than that. The island is owned by Scourie Estates, but it's managed by the Scottish Wildlife Trust. There are no sheep on the island, and there are no permanent residents on the island except for seasonal volunteers.
All ready?
Ready to go?
There are 2 beaches on Handa Island for landing. The north-facing beach is the closest one, and that's used during high tide, and at low tide the south-facing beach is used. They're about 100 to 200 metres apart from each other.
Welcome to Handa Island.
We were escorted from the beach to the main building on the island, which serves up as a shop as well. The footpaths on the island form a big loop around the western end of the island, and you can complete that in about 3 hours. Now the north end of the island has got all of the high sea cliffs, which are well over 100 metres tall, and the south end of the western island has got much lower outcrops of rock with occasional rocky sections and even 1 or 2 small beaches as well.
There, there's another one, look. There's 2. That is amazing.
Eventually, we reached the cliffs which overlook Puffin Bay. Contrary to the name, most of the puffins are not here. They're actually over the Great Stack. But we did actually spot one puffin in the sea cliffs.
That's really quite astonishing. So after Puffin Bay, we come to a place called the Great Stack. And ironically, this is a place where you're more likely to find puffins.
And here we had a much larger concentration of seabirds. The sea cliffs formed quite a large amphitheatre into which a large sea stack was located. And here the cliffs really do cut into the island quite a bit. Razorbills, guillemots, kittiwakes and fulmars make up the majority of the numbers of birds which you see on these cliffs. However, we were looking for puffins. They are quite rare on land after all. The best place to look for them is near the tops of sea cliffs. You'll find that they fly up and then they go into a little burrow just underneath the grass. They do have a very similar appearance to razorbills when they were in flight. Both the body and the flapping profile of the two species is very similar. However, one key difference is that puffins have got what I would call orange highlighter pen legs, and that's the key difference that you can use to tell which one is which when they are in flight.
Well, this place really is a magical place to go and look.
We left the vicinity of the Great Stack. Walking west, we found another line of cliffs. Walking along it, it wasn't apparent how grand these cliffs were, but once we rounded a corner at the south end and looked back, we could see how steep and featureless these cliffs are. And yet, birds had an ability to find ledges on the cliffs to do their nesting.
So what we have here is quinag. And then looking over here, we've got soyvin, and in the background we've got culbeg, and just behind soyvin we've got culmore.
Soon we were in the vicinity of rocky outcrops, low cliffs and rocky shores as we started to work our way east back to the main visitor centre. One or two small beaches were here, but not as large as the landing beaches for the ferry. Eventually we got back to the visitor centre and we were witnessing one of the ferries just leaving.
Okay, so we're now waiting for our boat. We're on boat number 3. So boat number 2 is the next one. So we've got an extra passenger.
Mr. Puffin or Mrs. Puffin.
The boat picked us up on the south beach and you could see the tide has gone out quite a long way. It's dropped about 2 meters. Now, overall, I'm going to have to say this is one of my best ever hikes that I've ever done. I've been walking in the Highlands of Scotland for 26 years and this walk easily reaches the top 10.
Okay, thank you, bye-bye.
Thanks a lot, cheers.
After the ferry journey, we returned to the cottage and we had some cheese and crackers in the early evening. At that point, we decided to go out for another walk, this time a shorter evening walk close by.
So after Handa Island, we're going on an evening walk. We're taking full advantage of this nice weather. And yes, we do have nice weather forecasts for the next few days, but the general rule of thumb in Scotland is don't waste nice weather. So over here we've got the western summit of Foinaven, and then we've got the Cranstacky Corbets. So this track goes in between the two mountain ranges up this glen. So we're just going to go for a nice walk along here before having some food later on in the evening time. So we get to this fairly modern fisherman's hut. So here we've got Foinaven and Cranstacky. We've only walked for about an hour and 15 minutes. Okay, so this is as far as we get, and it's now what, 7 o'clock in the evening?
7 o'clock.
So we'll be walking an hour and a half.
We returned back to the house where we could enjoy some steak pie and chips in the glorious view out over Loch Inchard. I didn't know it, but tomorrow was going to be even harder in terms of the walking.
Okay, so what are we doing today?
We're climbing Meall Horn and it's a very beautiful day.
Yes,
And we're very lucky.
yes. So we're not climbing Arkle.
No, Arkle's got too many ridges. Not for me.
Okay.
First part of this walk is quite long. It's paved and then a gravel track which goes on for about 5 kilometres before we start to get close to the slopes where we start to rise up.
Right, so here's Arkle. We've been walking along this track and now it crosses this bridge. So we're gaining a little bit of altitude. You can see Quinag on the horizon there. And this is the track walking up bit that we walk up, which goes between Arkle and Meall Horn. So the track continues all the way to a saddle point to the left of this steep nose. But we are going to head off the track. We've got Meall Horn just there. So we're going to drop down and then cross the stream. And then on the other side of the peat hags, we should get to thinner ground before getting to the ridge.
After dropping down through peat hags, we were starting to rise up towards Meall Horn. It was initially quite deep, heathery ground, but as the altitude climbed, the vegetation underneath started to thin out. But more importantly, the views out towards Arkle became ever more grand. We continued up the ridge to the summit, and looking back, the views of Foinaven revealed themselves in their grandeur. It wasn't long before we got to the summit, and then we could enjoy a nice 360-degree view all the way around.
Yay!
Yay! Objective achieved!
Right, this one's a bit of a mouthful called Meall Cor Leaf Ducal. I'll correct that in the subtitles if that's incorrect. Over here we've got Ben He. Over here, second most northerly Munro. I can't remember the name. That annoys me. Then we've got the hills of Caithness right in the distance. It's a bit more hazy compared to when we were on Ben Hope. Then we've got Ben Loyal. We've got Ben Hope here. Got Loch Erebol. Cranstacky. Arkle. Ben Stack. Quinag. Behind it you've got Sullivan, and behind Sullivan you've got a little bit of Stack Polly, and then you've also got Benmore Coigach. Then further round we've got Breabag, that's where the bone caves are, and then we've got on the horizon Anchelac, and we've got Convivol and Benmore Ascent. And then we're back to the mouthful.
On the way down, we tried to avoid the peat hags that we encountered on the way up by cutting across and contouring round to a higher point where we could meet the track. It was a relief to get back on the track, but it was a long way back to the car. The journey back down the hillside was hot and the track was quite stony. We were witnessing what looked like a thunderstorm emerging to the south of our location, about 20 to 30 miles over the Ascent region, and a review of the weather radar confirmed that. It was a thunderstorm that was gradually tracking west, even though the winds were from the north. We got back to the copse at the bottom of the hill slope, and then we had the track which turned into a paved tarmac road back to our car, and it was a great relief to get there. The temperature that day reached a sweltering 19 degrees, and we weren't done with the hot weather. Now, whilst that may not sound like very much to people living in California, It's hot by Scottish standards, and inside the car the temperature was touching about 50 degrees Celsius. That's what you get when your car has a roof that's made completely out of glass. The next day we headed back to Durness and Balnaceil beach. But this time, instead of heading along the Kyle of Durness direction, we decided to head along the beach to Farrite Head. This is a fantastic little short 2-hour walk. The beaches are absolutely gorgeous, and they had this nice turquoise colour and the really nice golden white sands. And you walk through sand dunes and eventually you get onto open meadows right beneath a Ministry of Defence observation post. It is possible to look for sea life on the east side of the peninsula. There are reports of puffins. We didn't see puffins here, but there are plenty of kittiwakes amongst other bird creatures.
So we're going to go on a walk to Sandwood Bay this afternoon. Now the main car park at Sandwood Bay was completely full up, and I mean it's a large car park, but it was just rammed full, and it's full of camper vans as well. This is an overflow car park. It's a bit further along the road. This is called Share. It looks like it drops down towards a small beach, and you can do some camping here. But what we're going to do is go back up the road and then turn left and find our way north to Sandwood Bay.
Out of Share, instead of going back up the road to the main car park, we instead took the Peach Road northeast out of Share, and then higher up there was a locken at about the 100-metre mark. We headed east over rough ground to intercept the main footpath which headed to Sandwood Bay.
So after a bit of rough stuff, we get onto the main footpath, which is quite a busy footpath, as you could probably expect.
The track soon turns into a path and it runs past a locken with a small little gravelly beach attached to it. We then carry on the footpath and then we round a corner, at which point we start to drop down into Sandwood Bay. There's a lot of sand dunes with a lot of vegetation on the approach to the main beach. But in spite of all the cars that we have parked at the main car park, when you actually get to the beach, the feeling you get is one of spaciousness. This certainly isn't a beach like Bournemouth, Brighton, Blackpool or Scarborough. It's one where you have a huge amount of space all to yourself, despite its popularity. In the early evening time, the path on the way back was a lot quieter. The mountains were looking absolutely glorious in the evening sunlight, and we decided to take the footpath all the way back to the main car park. At that point, Rachel decided to wait for me at the main car park whilst I went to fetch the car. That was a mistake for Rachel because I had a nice conversation with one of the horses who wanted to say hello to me along the way.
Rachel doesn't know what she's missing out on here. Catch you later. Bye bye.
The drive home from the Sandwood Bay car park was absolutely glorious, and I just had this feeling that this would actually be quite a nice place to live. I just wish the holidays, especially the week-long holidays, would just last that little bit longer, especially when the weather's nice.
Well, this is the final evening before we go home tomorrow. So what I want to ask is what has changed since November when I made the first video about taking my Tesla on holiday? Well, for one thing, the prices of electricity, particularly for domestic and small businesses, has gone up substantially. You're typically talking about paying 30 pence per kilowatt hour as opposed to 20 pence per kilowatt hour back in autumn time. But at the same time, the prices of electricity at the roadside chargers with ChargePlace Scotland have not kept up. So you've got this situation where it can be cheaper to charge up at a roadside charger, such as in Highland Council, where it's 20 pence per kilowatt hour for AC charging and 30 pence per kilowatt hour for DC charging. However, in on a holiday like this, where we've got a self-catering accommodation, it's always more convenient to charge up here. The other thing which has changed since autumn time is that there are a lot more electric cars on the roads. Now, when I bought my car in September, there are now double the number of Tesla Model 3s and Model Ys on the road compared to September last year. That's just 9 months of time. But there's one other thing which has changed. There are now grants available for small businesses such as bed and breakfasts and self-catering cottages to install electric car chargers in their own properties. It's £350 per charger, and you can install up to a maximum number of chargers. I'll put a description in as to how many that is for small accommodation like this. Now, at the moment, I am still hesitant to take my Tesla on a hotel holiday or a bed and breakfast holiday, because in that situation, it's unlikely to be able to park your car close to the accommodation and run an extension cable from that accommodation to your car. So you're left with roadside chargers, and roadside chargers are only convenient if it's incidental to whatever journey it is. And it was incidental to my journey when I went through Golspie on this holiday.
So it was with great reluctance that we set off the next morning for home. One thing I didn't mention was that we actually have a few more chargers in the Northwest Highlands of Scotland. There are now 2 lots of chargers at Kinlochbervie, which didn't exist there in November. There's one at the main car park in Kinlochbervie, and there's one at the health centre. So on the journey back home, we stopped by on the A838 at Lochmore, and we had a small walk of about an hour before getting back in the car and heading on to Lairg. At Lairg, we did a little bit of sightseeing, and Rachel wanted to go and see some gift shops, so we did that and also had some lunch. Then we carried on to the Dornoch Firth, and there we had a bigger walk. This is a hill called the Struy Hill, and it's located on the south side of the Dornoch Firth.
We are going to Struy Hill, which is just over here, and it's above the Dornoch Firth. So drive along the south side of the Dornoch Firth from Bonnell-Bridge or from Tain, and you'll get to this place.
The quality of the track going up was pretty good, with only a few small muddy sections. However, the day was getting warm, with temperatures recorded of 22 degrees, which is far too hot for most people in Scotland. However, once we got to the summit, we were rewarded not only with fantastic views, but also a very welcoming breeze.
So looking eastwards, we've got the outer Dornoch Firth, and we've got the Dornoch Bridge as well. Looking this way, looking further inland, you can see a hill. It's got a tower on it. That's Ben Braggy. That's just above Golspie. So looking out, we've got the Dornoch Firth. Looking inland here, we've got Ben Cleabrec above Altnahara. You can see Ben Hope, but it's a bit hazy. And then to the left of that, we can see Cranstacky. Now that's Ben Hee right there, and you've got some wind turbines in the foreground. Then over there, we've got Ben Stack. We were contemplating doing that today, but it was a very boggy footpath according to the guidebook. So zooming out, here we've got the upper Dornoch Firth. I don't know the name of this corbett here, but it's one which you climb from Ardguy. And then over here are the slopes which the foothills of Ben Wyvis. Good southern viewpoint here. In the distance you can see the Cairngorms. This looks like Cairngorm with Ben Macdui and Breriac. Over here in the distance we've got Ben Rinnes, and then we've got the Murray coast over here.
So it was back down to what was now a very hot car for the final portion of the journey back home. It's always good to make full use of the final day of travelling. There's no point getting home too early after all. We travelled home pretty much the same route that we travelled up. We took the Struy road over to Evanton where we picked up the A9, crossed the Cromarty Bridge, then over to the Keswick Bridge and then onto the A96 for the final stretch back home.
Right, that's a journey complete. So now it's time to unpack the car. So that's the end of the trip, and I've had a good holiday. And the weather has been glorious for the last 4 days, and that's a really good innings for a Scottish summer holiday. So in terms of future holidays, we're not going to have one until September, but we do have a cottage booked in South Uist. And this cottage has got something a bit different. It's actually got a Type 2 charger for your car. The other thing which is going to be coming up hopefully very soon is my battery, and I'm hoping I'm going to be able to produce a video about that in the not too distant future. But in the meantime, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I'll talk to you again very soon.